someone?
Me.
You murdered someone?
Yes.
Okay, who did you murder?
A man. Yes.
When did this happen?
1980 April, when I just left Boston.
The guy's tied up. Why beat him to death with a plank of wood?
So this case happened in 1980 and remained unsolved for 40 years. In 1980, a man named Anthony Bird, who worked in a pub, failed to turn up for work one day.
Okay.
So his job, called the police and was like, hey, can you do a check on our employee? He hasn't come to work today. They kicked down his door and they found him, his flat had been ransacked and he was tied up and naked on his bed.
Oh, God.
There was no evidence, there was no sign of where he had been or who he had met the night before, nothing.
Just to clarify, he was dead?
He was also dead.
Right, okay.
He was dead.
He could have just been there going, guys, where have you been? I've had such a night.
Finally, time to find me. No.
Okay.
He was dead, stripped. His family didn't know what happened to him for 40 years.
That's horrible. For 40 years?
Absolutely horrible, 40 years. And then, one day, a man walked into Hammersmith police station and says, I want to report a murder. Someone was like, whose murder? He's like, I'm the murderer. Don't know who the guy is.
Who murdered someone?
Me.
You murdered someone?
Yes.
Okay, who did you murder?
A man.
So Anthony Bird left work and he had told his friends that he had his eye on this black guy in the area. So that night, he approached the man who walked into the police station. His name is John Paul. John Paul's on the street and said that Anthony Bird said, will you have sex with me for money? John Paul was like, great, gonna rob this man. Absolutely, that's what he was gonna do.
You can see how the lady in the station maybe assuming this is just a drunk guy coming in for attention.
Yeah, who just walks in all the time. But what John Paul said in his confession was that day, he went back to flat with him, tied him up,
Right.
and there was a plank of wood by the bed, and he smashed him with it. Then he left him there, then returned to the flat, ransacked it.
To make it look like
No,
a robbery gone wrong?
He took a TV, he took anything of value from the flat,
Right.
and then left. No one knew he had been there. No one knew his name. No one knew anything until this day, on May 2021, where he came in and confessed. So the police weren't going to, you could tell the police weren't really taking him seriously from that video. But what happened was, there were fingerprints on the scene, and John Paul's fingerprints matched from that scene from 40 years ago.
So they just never, they found some evidence, but they never had it linked to anyone.
So they
didn't know anyone who had the matching fingerprints on
there.
their
They didn't have any matching
system.
fingerprints. And it's clear that John Paul had been in the system. He said he's been in Ballstall in there, but that's not the police system, and he wasn't connected to this murder. And if he hadn't walked in that day and just, I guess, got it off his chest, that would have gone unsolved.
It seems crazy. Like, I guess there was a time when there was much less CCTV and things like that. People were just generally a little less safe in that regard, and you could get away with a lot more.
You could literally get away with murder.
All right, it is February 1987 in Florida. And this story begins with a married couple. Leo Schofield is 21 years of age. His young bride is only 18. Michelle Schofield. They've got their whole lives ahead of them. And what happens on February 27th, 1987, is Michelle goes to work at the diner and she plans to meet her husband afterwards. She finishes her shift, jumps in the car, and disappears. He goes looking for her. He goes out with his father, drives around the area, sees no trace of her. And a few days later, a body is discovered in a drainage canal, wrapped in plastic, stabbed 26 times. It's the body
Somebody was angry.
of Michelle Schofield. 2 years later, at the trial, Leo is sent down for the murder of his wife and sentenced to life imprisonment,
It is always the boyfriend.
to which he's still serving the sentence. But what's interesting about this case is that his attorney argued at the time that there were fingerprints of another man in the car, the Mazda, that she was driving. There was another man, Jeremy Lynn Scott. Now, this is a very unscrupulous character. He's in prison at the moment after strangling a man with a phone cord.
Oh.
So he has other convictions. He's admitted to other murders in the past. I think there was a shooting of someone.
Florida.
The attorney argued that there were fingerprints of him around that car, which suggested this person, who already had a bad character about him, was more likely to be the killer. Years later, a Pulitzer Prize winning author, Gilbert King. He picked up the case to create a podcast around it.
We do love a true crime pod.
We do love a true crime podcast. And he wanted to build this podcast around it because he thought there was a clear miscarriage of justice. So he contacted both Scott in jail and Schofield to ask for their sides of the story. And what he ultimately found as the case unfolded was an admission of guilt from Scott, not only for the murder, but a detailed account of exactly what had taken place. And said he was picked up by young Michelle as a hitchhiker, was offered a lift. He asked her to
Only in the 80s.
Drove out to wherever he asked her to drive out to, which I guess was near this drainage canal, where he then murdered her. Now, he says that he only wanted to steal the car at the time, but when a knife fell out from his pocket, she began to scream. He panicked and went on to stab her 26 times. That sounds insane, if you ask me.
I just wouldn't do it that many times.
No one likes anyone screaming in their ear, but
Yeah.
no one...
You could just say, shh.
But despite his admission of this, the judge, the prosecution, the law in Florida are unwilling to overturn the case. The reason being that Leo Schofield, the husband, had character witnesses of their friends suggesting that the relationship was sometimes abusive, which built up this perception that he may be capable
that's old evidence.
of murder. They also said that Leo Schofield had failed a polygraph test when they first arrested him, that Jeremy Lynn Scott was a liar and that he admitted to all sorts of crimes that they don't know whether he did or not, and they don't have the evidence, and they're certainly unwilling to scrape through this evidence to find
His fingerprints
out.
not in the car.
His fingerprints were in the car. They were on this radio, which was later, I think, worth like $6,000, I guess, for creepy collectors out there. And still, to this day, they're both in jail. One of them is in jail for a crime he may not have committed. The other one is in jail for all sorts of other crimes, but still getting away with this one. And I guess that just leaves up to the viewer to decide for themselves whether they believe one guy or the other.
That is wild.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It does
These
seem
crimes
strange.
always surprise me. I'm not going to lie to you. Once again, dumbfounded.
We'll get this envelope now, and
who
it'll
knows
have
what it's
absolutely
gonna be.
nothing. They were both Capricorns. All right, let's find out. Do you want to do the honours?
I really, really do. Both victims serve chips for a living.
Are you having a laugh? Come
Anthony
on.
Bird worked in a pub in South London.
Right.
And Michelle Schofield worked in a diner.
Well,
So,
interesting
Okay.
stuff. I
Yeah.
like serving chips. It's an interesting little point.
Yeah.
If you work in McDonald's, Burger King, wherever you like, beer for your lives,
Or
because
fish and
there's
chip
a pattern
shops.
emerging. I love
a
a tenuous
scary
one.
pattern there. That
Terrifyingly.
was so
And
tenuous.
yet delicious pattern emerging.
Yeah.
Hopefully we'll have some more of those tasty patterns and otherwise on future episodes.
And we've been swiping crimes. I'm
We have.
Satema Tarawally,
I'm Jonny Nelson. Please hashtag like and subscribe.
because we have a hashtag now.
Oh, go ahead, caller. What's your emergency?
I just found a body.
Right, okay. A body, is it? Are they breathing?
No, they're dead. They look like they've possibly been there like a few days or something with some flies and stuff.
The headless body of Deborah Chong. It was a few days
They
later.
always remove the head.
For some reason, I don't know
I just
why.
feel like that's a really violent thing to do. So this story starts with a wedding day. Yes, Dawn Walker and Thomas Hutt.
Lovely summer wedding.
No, it was actually Halloween.
Halloween.
Not on Halloween day, but like Halloween week. It didn't look like a conventional wedding. Have a look at this dress.
Right. It's red.
It's bright red.
That's a vibe. Would you wear a red dress for your wedding?
I'm going to wear white no matter what. Maybe it was a Spanish theme. It did look quite like
Okay.
arriba. So it was a beautiful day. She wore her gorgeous red dress.
Lovely.
I mean, her whole family would have been there. She's a mother, a grandmother. She's been with this man for 3 years. It just sounds idyllic. But things went very bad, very, very fast. So they get home on their wedding night, and her husband murders her that night.
Not even like
No.
enjoy yourself for 24 hours. You wasted no time.
He wasted absolutely no time. They had no marriage life together. He punched and strangled her. And then get this. Instead of, leaving her there, he put her in a cupboard and then went on his holidays.
He left his new bride murdered in a cupboard and then went on the honeymoon
Hopped
that they
in
were
the
meant to have
car
together.
And went on his honeymoon. To Skegness.
To Skegness. Now, I've been to Skegness.
Yeah.
I went once with my mate and his family. Went to Butlins.
Butlins is fun.
I had a great time. It's a lovely place to go with friends and family. Maybe it's good to go on a honeymoon if you're into that kind of thing, but to go on your own post-murder sounds
Dark.
rogue.
He clearly was not a good man, and that did work against him. So when he got back from his holiday, he came back and put up Halloween decorations.
Going back and thinking, well, it's the holiday season, and getting your house decorated whilst you got a dead body like in the cupboard.
While he had it in the cupboard. So what he did was he took her body and squashed it into a suitcase. And obviously humans are not meant to fit in suitcases, so he had to almost break her leg to fit her in, and then dragged her to the back of the house and then proceeded to report her missing. But one thing he didn't expect is that his neighbours actually saw him dragging the suitcase at the back of his house. And also, he went to Skegness alone and told them he went with her. So they checked out all the CCTV footage and it was very clear that man was all alone. According to her family, he had isolated her from them, he had bullied her, he had abused her for years, and this, on their wedding day, is the day he chose to end her life.
Just shows the dangers of gaslighting and those kind of relationships, I guess, when someone sees another person as a possession to do with what they want and how that can snowball.
And it's so sad to know that that last day when she wore that red dress would be her last day alive. When the judge convicted him, he said that he is clearly a bully, and he actually gave him a minimum of 21 years to life, so hopefully he'll never be on our streets again.
Good. Well, that leads us on to my case.
Okay.
Let me set the scene. We start off in Wembley. Very affluent area. The two people this case is based around is Deborah Chong, who was a 67-year-old, and Gemma Mitchell, who's a sprightly 38. Now, these guys met in a church.
Nice.
Deborah was known for being this kindly, lovely person. She had some learning difficulties, but she would open her doors to the homeless. Gemma Mitchell, another churchgoer. She was on a Christian dating app. She really based her whole personality around her religion and around her faith. So Gemma has this £4 million house. It needs some work. She gets a company in to do it. They want to put a new floor in. They want to tear down the walls. They want to repair whatever needs to be repaired, get it on the market. Kindly Deborah from church has stumped up the cash, £200,000 into her account to get this work done.
£200,000?
It sounds crazy, but I suppose people with a lot of money, people who are close friends.
You're not going to have a lot of money if you give people £200,000.
Gemma has this 200 grand from Deborah. The work is underway, but the construction company that she'd paid to do the work goes bust, leaving a hole in that amount by £135,000 gone.
Building works never go the way you want them to go.
Gemma is in a pickle. But interestingly enough, what she's been doing throughout this friendship with Deborah is gather documents from Deborah's house. And she's starting to rework some of these documents to give herself a plausible and, most importantly, a sizable stake in Deborah's will. One day, Deborah goes missing.
No.
No one sees, no one knows where Deborah Chong has gone for some days. And the police finally find a suitcase way over in Devon with the headless body of Deborah Chong. It was a few days later.
They always remove the head.
For some reason, I don't know why.
I just feel like that's a really violent thing to do.
Really don't know why.
A head.
It does seem like such an extreme length to go to. I know when you've already killed somebody.
No, sorry. If I stabbed you right now, right?
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
one thing. If I stab you and then I'm like, oh, just gonna chop off your, that's a different act.
That is true.
It's worse.
To build the evidence together to find out what happened. They look at CCTV, and the only person who's gone in or out of Deborah Chong's property is Gemma Mitchell, her good friend, Gemma Mitchell.
From church.
So we actually have it on video here, if you want to take a look. She's circled on the video.
This looks like a nice neighbourhood.
It is very affluent,
Deborah
yeah.
clearly had the money.
And you can see how she's sort of painstakingly dragging that along there. She actually reactivated a neighbour's phone who had passed away and used that as her own. She then hired a car, placed the suitcase in it, and drove it all the way to Devon, 200 miles from when the murder took place.
Is it Devon like beachy?
I thought it was quite beachy. She takes the body over to Devon. For some reason, disposes the body in one place and the head in another, and comes all the way back to Wembley thinking, that's the job done. The issue is, the phone that she's reactivated still has a tracker on it. People know where your phones are, and people can see that a phone has been taken from her address, specifically, up to Devon, where this body was found, and all the way back again. So the police have the mobile phone, they have the motive, they have the documents, they have the CCTV footage of this one person, Gemma Mitchell, going in and out of this property.
They have her uncompleted house.
They have her uncompleted house. They have a lock, stock, and barrel.
I am so sad for Deborah. Deborah is a kind woman, and also she has learning difficulties, and it's really, really sad to see that if there's someone out there who has money and you can take advantage of them, people will do it.
There is a positive end to this story, that Gemma Mitchell was sentenced to life of 34 years in prison.
That's so good.
We do have an envelope, I believe.
The big reveal.
Both the killers lied about the victim going to the sea.
It wasn't the suitcase.
It was not the suit. We went for the obvious answer.
We really did, but I did say Devon was by the sea.
You did, and
I didn't know Skegness was by the sea.
I wrote that off immediately. I was like, oh no, it's woodland. Let's focus on the woodland. We were wrong all along. We've been sold a kipper.
I feel like we're going to have to be more clever than the producers moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to have to look outside of the box and give the less obvious answers. But I guess that's often how crimes are solved. Or in this case, swiped. Yeah, that was cheesy, wasn't it?
That was so good.
Like when I get a knife out, like when I stab him, like I just don't get this kid.
That's part of their relationship. That's how they fix problems. She pulls a knife.
A death match.
I want to tell you about the case of Bradley Lewis and Abigail White. Let me set the scene. They have a very tumultuous relationship in Bristol. They live together. Abigail is 24 years old, and Bradley Lewis is a young age of 22. Abigail makes what she claims to be £50,000 a year on, you guessed it, OnlyFans.
I didn't guess it. I thought maybe finance.
Hey, if you can make that money, make that money. No judgment here. But Abigail, who's making this £50,000 a year on OnlyFans, is doing it not under Abigail, but under fake Barbie. As you can imagine, that paints a picture, doesn't it? She's blonde, she's bosomed, she fulfills and ticks all the boxes.
I'm being her.
You're being her, just embodying. Take a look at this, guys. £50,000 on OnlyFans. Let me show you what she looks like, so you get a
Because
better
50
idea.
grand is not a small amount of money.
This is the pair of them together. They're dressed up for Halloween there, but she is dolled up. You can see where the Barbie vibes come from. Blonde, buxom.
I'm not gonna lie, that is a very good-looking couple. They're hot.
I do have another picture of her though, where she isn't quite as dolled up. Where I'm not so sure I'm getting Barbie vibes from that. I'm getting more. Who were the Moors murderers? They're shouting, they're breaking up, they're getting back together, but ultimately they are staying together. They're working through these differences each and every time. Until
I wouldn't want to leave someone making 50 grand a year though. In Bristol, that is very comfortable.
That's good money in Bristol, fair play. 2022, 25th of March, they go to the pub together. Technically, they're just broken up.
They're one of those couples though.
I'm not going to lie, I've been in those relationships where I'm like, yeah, I think it's over. And then 2 hours later, it's like, well, we're giving it another go. But on this particular night, she was on the shot, she was on the rum and coke, she was on the cocaine. Oh. She was having,
cocaine?
She was on, yeah.
That's a night.
She's pushing
Where
the
is
boat
this
up.
pub?
The night ended with her throwing her drink over him, but then them both getting a taxi away together. The next thing anyone hears from them is when the next door neighbours of Abigail hear screaming in the garden. They come out, they find her on the phone to the police trying to get hold of the emergency services, covered in blood and in hysterics. They go into the house, they find young Bradley lying on the ground, bleeding from the chest after a single stab wound through the heart.
Poor lad.
He's taken to the hospital and I'm sorry to say passed away in the early hours the next morning. The police turn up, they take her away, take her into questioning. She says, we got into an argument, things got so heated, a knife came out and he stabbed himself.
He Romeo and Juliet it. It was like, I'm
Completely.
done.
They check her phone records and they find all these messages. They find a voice note in particular between her and a friend where she says, he only takes me seriously when I've got a knife out. He only takes me seriously when he's scared I'm going to kill him, when he's scared I'm going to stab him.
Oh my God.
And I fully believe that I'm quite capable of killing him if he hurts me again. Or I'm gonna end up being in prison. I don't believe a word that comes out of that boy's mouth. I have to beat the living daylights out of him for him to tell me the truth, and he still don't tell me the truth. He only tells me the truth when he thinks I'm gonna kill him. Like when I get a knife out, like when I stab him, like, oh, I just don't get this kid.
That's part of their relationship. That's how they fix problems and sort out their issues. She pulls a knife.
A death match.
But it shows how people kind of like normalize that kind of stuff in relationships, that kind of behavior.
That dreadful dynamic of like, oh, it's so passionate, it's so this, it's so that. That's sad. You should never ever stay in a situation like that. Love can make you do crazy things though, which kind of brings you to my story, which is another story of jealousy. So Luisa and Pedro Santos from Portugal have now moved to Warwickshire, I believe it's Coventry, and they are running a pub.
Yeah.
And they've hired this lovely young girl called Hannah Pritchett. And Luisa truly believes that Pedro is sleeping with Hannah. Luisa is completely jealous of Hannah. She honestly thinks that she's doing anything to get the attention of Pedro. But Pedro's just like, I'm just being a boss. I'm just speaking to her. She speaks to me about college. She speaks to me about her boyfriend, you know, normal things that 80-year-olds speak about.
So they weren't doing anything as far as we're aware. They weren't getting up to anything.
Pedro says they're not, but I just want us to have a little look at
Pedro.
gorgeous young Hannah, who was only 18 years old at the time.
Yeah, beautiful.
Luisa was absolutely adamant that her and her husband were having an affair.
Right.
And she said to her husband, you have to end this. You have to choose me or choose her. If you do not, trouble is going to happen.
Okay.
What the trouble is, she doesn't say.
Yeah, that's left vague.
She leaves it vague, but I'm telling you, it is not good. So Hannah comes into work. She's there polishing.
Why is she polishing? Finish the sentence.
She's polishing
Spoons.
cutlery.
Right, good.
She's polishing cutlery.
Woo!
And the witnesses said, all the other staff said, that Luisa was so jealous just at the sight of her that she starts ferociously beating eggs.
Beating those eggs.
She is beating those eggs so ferociously that people remember. That's one of the things I remember, that she saw and she was like, ugh.
My mind is going to all sorts of places here.
The eggs are a meringue by now. They're just, it's all so fluffy.
It's
The eggs
delicious.
are so fluffy.
Delicious and scary.
And she picks up a fish knife and heads towards Hannah and starts stabbing her just as ferociously. She stabs her in her hip, she stabs her in her buttock. As soon as she saw her coming towards her, she runs out into the car park. Hannah actually fell bleeding. Luckily, she was rushed to hospital and they managed to save her with surgery. She was so jealous. She swore this in court, she swore this in front of all the witnesses, that her husband had even moaned Hannah's name during sex.
Really?
Yeah.
Hannah. Yeah, that could be like breathing. That could be, sorry, but like, that could just be him going, Hannah! All I'm trying to say is he may not have said her name. And at the end of the day, if they're still having sex, how bad could that relationship actually be? Think about it.
The judge obviously could see her very obvious malintent and she went down for attempted murder. I'm not sure Luisa or Fake Barbie could ever really be good people after that. They're clearly far too jealous, far too passionate. I don't really like the word passionate.
Yeah.
Because like, I think I'm passionate, but I'm not going to stab anyone.
That's true.
But these two people
As
stab
far as
people.
we know.
Is that the connection between them?
Let's find
Let's
out, shall we?
see.
We've got it in an envelope here.
Envelope. It's just like in the Oscar moment.
Just like in the, try and get it right.
Ah!
Both pubs in the story had Horseshoe in their name. Horseshoe Pub in Bristol and the 3 Horseshoes in Warwickshire. Now, I mean,
That's a nice and right connection. I don't feel like silly for not noticing that one because neither of us mentioned it.
But 2 really interesting stories. Two really interesting stories.
2 really interesting stories.
And
2
2
women.
recent
far
stories
too,
as well.
Far too jealous, far too aggressive.
Crimes of passion.
So she died from their injuries?
Yes.
which now makes me responsible for murder.
That's right, yeah.
But in a fit of rage, Stephen Craig took Jacqueline into a car park, doused her in petrol, and set fire to her. I'm going to start us off in 1998.
Oh.
It's when a man called Stephen Craig serves jail time for an attack on his then girlfriend, Jacqueline. So they have a tumultuous relationship. He had spent time homeless. He had struggled with alcoholism and drugs when he met Jacqueline, and they formed a relationship
Sounds like a catch.
It really was, where she tried to sort of build him back up. Unfortunately, the relationship didn't work out the way they would have hoped. Things did become aggressive, and they decided to go their separate ways. But in a fit of rage, Stephen Craig took Jacqueline into a car park, doused her in petrol, and set fire to her. Now, Jacqueline survived, but she suffered 35% burns across her body. She needed endless skin grafts, a tracheectomy, where I think they take part of your throat.
Yeah, you have to eat and stuff through a tube.
Yeah, she spent 9 months in hospital, and there was many more procedures after that to try and give her some quality of life. The good news is he served jail time, but he clearly wasn't a very nice man, was he? He's clearly someone who is troubled, who is suffering with anger issues, and he's willing to go to disgusting lengths to show how angry he is.
So why did he do this? Why was he so angry?
Well, he was angry purely because of the way the relationship had gone. But what's interesting about what happened is the fact that he chose petrol as a way to show this anger. And the reason what he gave is that he was fascinated by the film Reservoir Dogs. Now, Reservoir Dogs is a movie that came out around 92.
Yeah.
Quentin Tarantino, one of his early movies
I have a t-shirt.
that made his name. And I have a t-shirt as well.
Yeah.
But he was fascinated by that because it's an incredibly violent movie where someone is doused in petrol and set alight.
Fire.
Now, as I said, he went to jail. He was convicted. But Jacqueline survived. And that's just one of the reasons why, after 15 years, he was let out of prison.
Whoa.
One of the big reasons he was let out was because he didn't murder anyone. She didn't die.
He wanted to kill her, though, didn't he? I mean, was Jacqueline still alive when he was released?
She was. While she was frail and she suffered with ill health, she was able to raise her children. But as I mentioned, she did suffer with ill health. And in 2019, she sadly died at the age of 61. Her intestines were swelling, and because of all the scar tissue across her chest and abdomen, her body wasn't able to expand the way a normal healthy body would do, and that helped lead to her death. In 2019, Stephen Craig was rearrested because they knew what he'd done had indirectly led to her early death.
The injuries he did made her succumb to death, even though it was 20 years later.
Even though it was 20 years later, he was rearrested and charged with murder.
By Steve.
So she died from her injuries,
Yes,
which now makes me responsible for murder.
that's right, yeah.
He was sent down for a minimum term of 34 years.
That is justice doing its work. This crime actually happened in Dumfries, which, fun fact, was voted the happiest place to live in 2017.
It's because of all their snooker holes.
Yeah, but this isn't a happy case.
Okay, go on.
This is not a happy case at all. This man, Ian Edwards, was in a snooker hall car park,
Right.
picking up his partner, Leslie. So they had an argument earlier in that day, but they wanted to reconcile, so he went to pick her up. But naturally, when they met up, they started fighting again. And two women in the car park named Nicola and Chantel did not like the way that he was speaking to Leslie.
Okay, how was he speaking to her?
They were saying that he was being aggressive, he was threatening her, and it seemed like he would hurt his partner.
He seemed like they had that kind of relationship where it's clear to everyone around that there's a
quite
boundary that has
volatile.
been crossed there.
I don't know. Would you get involved if you did see two people arguing?
You see people arguing all the time.
Yeah.
But there is a way in which people can talk to each other. And when people are being incredibly aggressive, or they talk as if someone is, you know, dirt on their shoe, or someone is like subhuman, or things like that, I think it gets to a point where people do intervene.
Yeah, I do have a lot of fear when it comes to like approaching strangers or people acting volatile in the street, because I'm like, I just don't know.
When I went down to London, it felt like the atmosphere was very different, and people are a bit more standoffish.
We mind our business. Have you ever cried on the tube before? No one will ask you if you're okay.
I've not cried on the tube, not yet, but fingers crossed for 2023.
So they both just approached him and started shouting at him and saying like, if you want to hit a woman, you better hit me. So they approached him with quite a lot of anger and aggression, and Ian retaliated with the same level of like anger and was making fun of them and was like, all right then, come on then, if you really want to have it, come and have it, and goading the two women, come on then, come and have it.
Right.
And then he decided to get in the car. His partner actually follows him into the car, but leaves her door open. He very quickly reverses the car into the two women. The two women are knocked over by the car door. Ian at the time was high on cocaine and was alcohol fueled. He drove away and then called the police himself and said, I've knocked down a woman, don't know what's happened to her, but I knocked her down.
Wow.
He was later arrested because Nicola was taken to hospital and obviously succumbed to her injuries.
Wow, okay.
While Chantel got up absolutely fine.
Awful things have happened to people and they've gotten up and they've been okay.
Yeah.
In a film they call it, you know, just a flesh wound and you're
Yeah.
all right. Whereas someone else within millimeters.
Two people standing right next to each other. One passed away, one didn't. So when he first told the police what happened, he said that Nicola actually had approached him with a knife.
Right.
But he later admitted that was not true. There was no knife involved. He just, for no reason, reversed into these two women, except for the fact that maybe to scare them. Who knows? Maybe it was the cocaine. So he was convicted, but not convicted of murder. He had a charge of something called culpable homicide. But he did plead guilty, which meant he only served 7.5, which just doesn't feel like enough.
So you can walk out of jail after that time still saying, well, I didn't do anything wrong because I don't admit guilt.
And he's killed a grandmother. It's really, really sad. This was not a happy day in Dumfries. So, besides the fact these both happened in car parks, because we could not presume it's the obvious, what do you think the link is?
I don't know.
Okay,
let's find out, shall we? Let's take a look.
mystery hand.
Both victims' surnames are Kirk. Jacqueline Kirk.
Okay, that is
And Nicola.
another tenuous link. That is...
A Kirk-spiracy?
You be ashamed.